Thank you, and welcome everybody to the first presentation session for the conference. I see we have 70 odd participants already. It's undoubtedly people will be joining us as we go along. Just before I introduce the first speaker, can I remind everybody that we are trying to raise funds for FEL as part of this operation. I've just put the link in the chat, so if you haven't donated already, could you please consider doing so? Just click on the link. Even a small amount, £5, $5, 500 yen, 500 rupees, whatever you can afford. FEL offers grants for grassroots work and concentrates on language revitalization. So it's one of the few places where communities can get support. So please, we're at 65% of our goal. So please, let's get 100% or even better than that. So the first speaker that we have today is our colleagues from Anhui University, Tianlei Zheng and Haoyu Lin, talking about digital tools in the creation of Huk-ziu-ua learning materials.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Go ahead. I'll give you a warning with 10 minutes to go, but please feel free, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm actually going to use a pre-recorded presentation, but I'm happy to take questions after the presentation. Okay. Today we're going to talk about two digital tools in the creation of Huk-ziu-ua learning materials. My name is Zheng Tianlei. I'm a software engineer. My co-author Lin Haoyu is a student of Chinese language at Anhui University. So Huk-ziu-ua is the language spoken at our hometown. And over the past few years, Haoyu and I have been working on language revitalization projects on behalf of this language. So the two tools we're going to introduce to you today are a digital input tool called Huk-ziu-ua. It's a piece of software that allows you to type in Huk-ziu-ua orthography. And the second tool is a dictionary app for Huk-ziu-ua. It doesn't need a lot of introduction. Well, it's a dictionary app. But we'll show you during this talk how these tools came into being and what's the role of them in the context of Huk-ziu-ua revitalization, specifically in the creation of teaching and learning materials. First of all, let me give you some background information. Huk-ziu-ua is mostly spoken around the city of Fuzhou, which is on the southeast coast of China. You may have heard of it as Fuzhou dialect in the literature. It's a dialect of the Eastern Ming branch of Chinese. There are many sub-dialects. The Minhou and Downtown dialect is the one that we're actually talking about today. It's also known to its speakers as Banghua, everyday language, or Huk-ziu-ua, Huzhou language. That's the term I'm referring to the language throughout this talk. Some linguistics context. So as a variety of Chinese is a tonal language, it has 7 citational tones with some complex Sandy rules when it comes to speech. It's mostly analytical, and it has multiple stratas of sources of vocabulary due to different waves of migration in history. The status quo of Huk-ziu-ua is that it's spoken in Fuzhou and the surrounding areas, which has a current population of 7.7 million people. Not all of them can speak Huk-ziu-ua fluently. according to Ixonlog, I think this data is dated. It has 8 million speakers. My experience is that it's probably the situation is probably equivalent to what's level 7 on Fishman's graded intergenerational disruption scale, which means that the child-bearing generation knows the language well enough to use it with the elders, but not transmitting it to the children, which is actually the case in my family. My parents didn't teach me Huk-ziu-ua actively when I was growing up. And certainly most young parents in Fuzhou today, they are not teaching their kids to speak Huk-ziu-ua. So I think that's the situation. So the situation is quite dire today. In terms of government attitude, these days it is not that restrictive. It's not forbidden to speak Huk-ziu-ua, but also there's no kind of material support in revitalization. The revitalization efforts are mostly led by volunteers. So the structure of this talk, first of all, we're going to talk about some of the challenges in creating pedagogical materials for Huk-ziu-ua. And second, what tools we build to try and tackle these challenges. Then we'll talk about how they allowed us to, like what those tools allowed us to achieve. And finally, we'll set out some directions for future work. First off, challenges. So the context is how you started to author Huk-ziu-ua learning materials for a group of high school students back in 2017. Around the same time, I was starting to create social media posts to promote awareness of Huk-ziu-ua, mostly in written form. So both efforts involved writing language down, even though sometimes we need to create audio, or like the written form is still an important part. But when it comes to orthography, there's a very interesting dual writing system situation for Huk-ziu-ua and for most Chinese varieties as well. The most adopted writing system for Huk-ziu-ua is Chinese character-based. Here's an example of a folk story on the right that's written in characters in Huk-ziu-ua. And it really has a tradition that dates back to the 16th century. But since Chinese characters themselves don't convey pronunciation very well, we also need an auxiliary system, a Romanization system. There's been a couple in the history. There's one created by the missionaries, and many scholars invented their own Romanization schemes for Huk-ziu-ua. And the scheme that we use in our tools is called Yngping, which is our creation based on previous work. So looking back, we found that there were 3 main challenges when it comes to writing in Huk-ziu-ua. The first is that the general public has very low adoption and very little awareness of the writing system for Huk-ziu-ua. This is kind of expected because of language shift, because of promotion of Mandarin. Most people in Fuzhou today, they only learn to read and write Mandarin at school. So this to a widespread misconception that Huk-ziu-ua is not writable. But that's fine. This is kind of our job to promote awareness, to let more people use the writing system. What is more challenging is that even within the small community of people that does know how to write or does attempt to write Huk-ziu-ua, there are gaps in the orthography system. Right, first is that many morphemes, there's no consensus on how to write them. A common example, Giang is a very common morpheme. It means child. It has a list 2 written form that's used by many people. Words with unclear etymology. So, for example, bulonong, which means it's so disgusting that it's strikingly disgusting. It's a funny word, but we don't know its the origin, and therefore we don't know what's the correct characters to assign to this word. And there are many accents and varieties for each word. For example, the word bag, you can say as doi or doi. the word to eat. Some people say as xie, some people are saying as xia, some people say as xia. So it comes to the problem is like which pronunciation we use when we try to write it down in Romanized form. And the third challenge, which is actually the most painful point that we felt, is there's no accessible tools for content creators and for learners. Dictionaries does exist, but they are very hard to purchase and they're not easy to use. Each dictionary uses slightly different orthography, it uses different symbols and different romanization schemes. It's a hassle for people, trying to look for words in different dictionaries at the same time. And it's really, really inefficient to type Huk-ziu-ua morphemes on the computer. The only tools we had were Mandarin input tools, Mandarin IMEs. And to show you what I mean here, say we're trying to type this sentence, please give me his book. In Huk-ziu-ua, it's colloquially said as Kilan Do本居肯外. But if you want to type it with Mandarin IME, which is what we had at the time, you need to first come up with the Mandarin pronunciation of each character, which is 启动掏一许本书其我. This is a nonsense sentence in Mandarin. The context is that in China, most people use US keyboard, like Latin alphabet keyboards. And they use a program called IME to take Romanized form as input and then give you a list of candidate characters to choose from. Because this is like a long nonsense sentence, Mandarin IMEs are not yield optimized for this use case. Many words that's common in Huk-ziu-ua, they're not that common in Mandarin. So it's hard to find in Mandarin IMEs. Some characters that doesn't even exist in Mandarin IMEs. So we had hiccups in typing every single sentence with this approach. What we really want is to be able to type like this, right? Kilong is just K-I-L-O-O-Y-N-G, something like that. That's much more intuitive. And it's actually what we set out to build. The first tool that we built started in late 2017 is this tool called Xingjiao IME. It's modeled after Mandarin IMEs. The difference is that it takes Yngping, which is the romanization scheme we devised for Huk-ziu-ua as input, and the outputs Huk-ziu-ua in Chinese characters. So here's an example of me trying to type, sorry, the video doesn't play here, but this is to give you an example of how this is used in action. This is me typing a short story in Huk-ziu-ua using the IME. Basically, the idea is how you speak should be the way you type. Right? And for that purpose, we also devised a romanization scheme. It's adapted from the scheme devised by Li et al. 1993. It's based on the broad transcription of Huk-ziu-ua in IPA, and the choice of symbols that we use, we deliberately picked those symbols to be as close to Hanyu pinyin as possible, so that people with Mandarin background can easily learn to use the system. Well, how we did it, it's basically a very giant word list. Behind the scenes, an IME is just a giant word list. As of today, we have 21,000 entries in our database, which is just a text file. What we put in the list are character writings for each word or phrases and the Yngping romanized form for the pronunciations. A couple of details that worth mentioning here, like each entry, we assign an ID to it. It's keyed by senses. So if we have two words with two different pronunciations and senses, but share the same characters, we will actually separate them. And that's a particular design choice. And we also try to, whenever possible, attach some metadata to the words. So in this example here, we're saying like this morpheme ba, it has alternative written form. And thirdly, another piece of metadata is which variant is this pronunciation for, right? You can see that there are multiple pronunciations for the same word. Some of them are just different phonetic realizations in speech. But some, as circled in red here, are different accents. So the idea is that with this metadata, we're able to customize our IME for different speakers. This is actually a work in progress. So around the middle of 2019, we felt that the bulk of work for the IME was already done. And also we realized that the use cases for IME was really, really narrow because there weren't a lot of people who are able to write, who are interested in writing Huk-ziu-ua, because we're at level 7 of the GIDS scale. So the only users are content creators, people trying to create pedagogical material in Huk-ziu-ua. Can we take this further? Can we make greater use of the data? Well, as we said, one of the challenges is that there's no easily accessible dictionaries. IMEs are great if you know what you want to type, but what if you don't know which words you want to use? You kind of still need a dictionary. And with the help of many, many volunteers, we managed, over the past 2 years, we managed to digitalize a couple of dictionaries in full text. So that allowed us to essentially build a dictionary app. I think it doesn't need a lot of explanation of what it does. This is a dictionary app we built. It's called Yngping. It allows you to do a couple of things. For example, you can look up a word by its pronunciation. If you know how to use the Romanization scheme, if you know the pronunciation, there's some heuristics to allow you to, allow some error margin, so you don't have to be precise. And once you find a word, we give you its pronunciation, its explanations, and if possible, if we have the data, example sentences. You can also query by Mandarin glosses. Here's an example of me trying to find the word that means mango. So I put in mango, which is mango in Mandarin, in the search box, and the app tells me that the equivalent word is huanshuo in Huk-ziu-ua. And you can also look up, for each individual characters, you can look at its pronunciation information. We're also working on matching and filling in, matching different dictionaries. As we mentioned, that different dictionaries use different orthographies, and there are gaps in the orthography. We're trying to find a way, this is our experiment, we're trying to find a way to fill in the gaps in the orthography. This is one of the efforts that's currently underway. The goal is to provide a unified view for users of the dictionary, the learners of Huk-ziu-ua, so that you can see that we give you a recommended writing for a word, but also show you like what's the different sources, how it is written, the alternative forms as it's written in different sources. Okay, so what does those tools mean to the Huk-ziu-ua community? This is how I think about the roles of the two tools that we created. So first of all, we have on the very bottom layer, we have our data sources. So these are the dictionaries, the giant word list that we created for the IME, and hopefully some corpuses in the future. And on top of that, we created a layer of standardization and unification. We fill in the gaps in the orthography. This is opinionated, but we take that and we take those unified forms and we build on top of them utilities such as the input tools and the dictionary app. And with those utilities, then we create textbooks, social media posts, and classes And these creations will reflect the orthography that we created at the lower level. Another way of putting this is that digital tools allowed us to democratize the written form of Huk-ziu-ua. So that actually more people can take a part in creating more written material for Huk-ziu-ua, which is beneficial for the whole community. This year on our social media accounts, we created, or rather a team of creators, not just me and Haoyu, a couple of more people, created 71 posts with Huk-ziu-ua written forms, and which resulted in about 34,000 unique views. We created like word cards, dialogues, we make these neat posters with proverbs on it. All of these creations contains Huk-ziu-ua text and Romanization forms. All the text you see here were created with the help of our IME and dictionary app. So it's no longer, the work is no longer on a single writer. We're able to scale from 2 people writing the text to about 20 people nowadays who actually participated in the content creation process. When I first started my first Huk-ziu-ua social media account back in 2017, it was almost impossible to delegate work because there were so few people who know how to use the writing system, how to look up the dictionaries, how to type Huk-ziu-ua characters using Mandarin IMEs. But nowadays, it's relatively easy to onboard new content creators. Recently, have a new team member who is really good at, has really good spoken proficiency in Huk-ziu-ua, but had no prior knowledge of Huk-ziu-ua orthography. But we were able to train her, and within 2 or 3 weeks, she was able to produce learning materials, written form in Huk-ziu-ua. And what's really nice is that with that effort, we were able to achieve consistency between among all the different writers in our team, because we're using the same tool, right? All the characters came from the same IME. We use the same dictionary, and the dictionary recommends the same written form for the same morpheme, for the same word.
Tianlei,
I think that's a really important, like, small step.
Sorry, 5 minutes?
You have 5 minutes remaining if you want to leave time for questions.
Okay. Sure. We can jump to questions. Actually, there's no
Very important.
Yeah, the key point I'm trying to say here is
and try.
Let me quickly jump to the conclusion part, maybe.
And with those,
yeah. So the key points here is that with those tools, we were able to let more people participate in the process of creating written materials. And right now, I think now that we have the tools, now that we're starting to fill in gaps in the orthography systems, the next step is actually to promote it and get wider adoptions. Yeah, and that's basically something that we need to be working on. Other things, other areas of improvement include we want more community participation in the process of determining what's the written form to use, and also support for different varieties and accents. Yeah, that's it. I'm happy to take questions. And also, this is the acknowledgement that this is not the sole work of the 2 of us here. This is actually work of lots of people, most of them volunteers, who made those things possible. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. That was a really interesting project that you described for us. If anyone has any questions, can you just put them in the chat, and I will call upon, indicate that you have a question and put in the chat, and I will call upon you. Before I move to that, can I just ask you, do you know Professor Yan Jiang, who is at SOAS at University of London?
Not sure. Can you, you can maybe type his name in chat or?
Yeah, I'll do that. He is a specialist on non-Mandarin varieties of Sinitic languages, and he's particularly focused on the languages and groups in southeastern China, and he has an enormous collection of digitized pre-modern materials, lots and lots of missionary grammars and dictionaries and so on. So you may want to, yeah, Miho has given you the link there, so I would suggest you get in touch with him. The second, my sort of question would be, many endangered language situations, such as the one you, the kind of context you described for us, the focus is not on writing, but it's on oral usage. So encouraging the parents' generation who speak the language fluently to actually speak it and to create context where that is possible. Is there anything like that happening?
Yeah, I would say that's very limited, because I'll just show you like what's like why we started more like from a written form approach. Like I understand that, you know, at this stage of the language, it's probably not a priority to promote writing system to everyone, which is actually not what we're trying to do here. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to promote writing system to a small community of people who can then create impact on either by creating teaching material or by, you know, calling for actions on different kinds of campaigns and social media. So the thing is, like for me and Haoyu, the two of us, we for a long time we didn't live in Huzhou. We actually worked. I was studying overseas. Haoyu is not in Huzhou as well. So this is the only way we can contribute, which is to build tools. We couldn't go into each family and go into society to do the actual groundwork for encouraging home-based language transmission. But that's a good point.
Okay, thank you very much. We can see that as a first step, perhaps, for future work. So thank you again for your presentation, and we need to move on now to the next presenter. Hopefully they're waiting for us. Kavita Rastogi and Madri Kakoti from the University of Lucknow, who will be talking about developing pedagogical materials for Raji revitalization, learnings and responses. Are you there, Kavita?
Dr. Austin, I'm here, and I'm sure Kavita ma'am is here as well.
Okay, you go ahead. And
I think she's unable to unmute herself. Ma'am, if you could unmute yourself. Kavita ma'am.
Madri, I will tell you about 10 minutes to go when we can move to questions, if you like.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Ours is a joint presentation, so we have divided our presentation into 3 parts. In the beginning, I'm going to tell you about the background of the community and about their language, and about the revitalization program we are using for the community. And later on, Madri will tell you about the development of pedagogical material and our learning and responses. Next slide, please. Raji is the name of the community. I'm working since last 20-25 years. Other than Raji, they are also called Banraji, Banrawat, Banmanus. Other names are there in the screen for you. But I would like to mention you that Banmanus means chimpanzee. And since this community was a hunter-gatherer type, they used to live in jungles. In 1823, when people in India came to know about them, they used to call them Banmanus. According to the Census of India 2011, their total population was only 732. But in 2019, we did our own census and we counted them as 899. They live in 11 hamlets as our official records mention, but all these hamlets are geographically very scattered, and so it was very difficult to work with this community, because whenever we wanted to organize some workshop, it was really very difficult to assemble them in one place. In 2019, while doing the census, we learned that initially they were hunter-gatherers. Then government of India tried them to settle down, but presently also still they are not very comfortable with the idea of settled life, because we have noticed that they deserted one of the hamlet and they have shifted to others, and now they totally live in 12 geographically scattered hamlets. Earlier they used to hunt, and wooden bowl making was their also very indulging occupation, which they used to do. But once they were settled in the small hamlets, they stopped hunting also, and they no longer make those wooden bowls also. So right now, wood cutting, farming, and most of them primarily work as a daily wage laborers. So these all things shows their dependence on of their dominant community, their dependence on the dominant community. Earlier, when they used to live in jungles, they used to eat their hunted meat, and some tubers were also they were very fond of those tubers. But now, due to acculturation, they have started eating rice and local pulses and some vegetables. Next slide. So the name of their language is also Raji. Recently, I have noticed that a new term for this community, as well as for their language, is being used by many of the community person and by others also. That is Rajbar for the community, and Rajbari is for the language. So Raji, you can say that Raji is an ethnonym which is used for the language as well as for the community. Though the present situation of the language is it's very difficult. Actually, presently Raji is used in home domain only, and within the community. If two community members visit marketplace, or they visit some other area, within them they use Raji, but they have to speak either Kumaoni Hindi or they speak Hindi to communicate with others. And the other community, that is Kumaoni people, or the people who reside in their hamlet or in nearby marketplaces, only 1% of those outsiders, they have learned their language. They don't know, they don't understand their language, and they don't use their language also. In 1971, when government was trying to bring this community in the mainstream, they established a Raji residential school specifically for Raji children, and Raji children used to live here, and they were provided all the facilities by the government. But when I want to mention here that I first visited them in 1998, and later on I visited them several times. And when in 2017, along with Madri, we visited the area, we found that Raji residential school was closed, and all the children from Raji residential school were shifted to Rajki Avasi Vidyalaya Balwakot. This shifting of Raji children from their own residential school to a common school where other community children were also studying was a kind of setback for the Raji children, because during our visit we noticed that attitude of the teachers of this school was not very encouraging. And in the whole school, only one person from their community was employed. And that person also used to say that he is not a Raji person. So all in all, I want to highlight that the attitude of the others as well as the attitude of the community is not very encouraging, rather it is negative. Next slide, please. So this is a picture of the new school, and if we see the cultural aspect of Raji language, we found that no Raji song has left now, no story is there. We tried to ask them several times, but due to acculturation, due to contact, they have lost their folk art and culture. So as of now, the number of speakers is very less. All the speakers and all the Raji families live below the poverty line. So their socio-economic and social status is very low. Code reduction is there, and attitude is also very negative. And since their number is very small, no political leader is inclined, no political party is attracted, and they want to do something. They are not very interested in doing something for the community. And if we talk about the language and the genetic relationship of language, I would like to highlight that Grierson in his survey used a word jungli for the language. And in Hindi, jungli means that belongs to forest. So in Hindi, we use this term in a very derogatory connotation. So, but according to Grierson, this language belongs to Tibeto-Burman family, but there are some linguists, according to them, this language belongs to Munda family also. After doing research and analysis, I have also tried to place this language into Tibeto-Burman family and into the as a subfield of Himalayas branch. So in 2002, after collecting data, collecting material from the community, administering questionnaires in the community, I tried to establish that Raji falls between C and D groups established by Wurm, and we can call it as a potentially endangered language. Present UNESCO online Atlas of Endangered Languages describes Raji as severely endangered language. So in 2002, I chalked out a program in the following heads, and my objective was to prepare a grammar for the community, to develop orthography, to develop curriculum, some resources for the community and dictionary for the community, and last, a creation of a community learning center. I'm happy to share with all of you that all the 4 heads, I have completed my work, but I realized that except the third point in which we have developed some resources for the community, the grammar was for academic circle, the dictionary is also for the academic circle. Yes, orthography has been developed with the help of the community, with their participation, and we are trying to use that developed orthography system to create and to develop resources for the community. Over to you, Madri.
Thank you, ma'am. I would like to take a point of reference from my previous speaker's presentation, where answering a particular question, he informed that the writing system was, even though it is not a priority currently as far as the languages are concerned, but still it was developed so that a small group of people, from the community itself could use the writing system if they feel the need to record something, to start something, to start some kind of documentation of anything which they feel is necessary. So I feel that the orthography development that Professor Rastogi has done for the community is also headed towards the same way, because in the last few workshops that we have had the opportunity and the privilege to do with the community, we have seen that the children below the age of 16, who are at school at the moment, they have actually taken to the orthography, and we have been very happy and very lucky to have elicited a few things which we thought were completely lost. For example, we had for at least 4 years of the work that I have done with Kavita ma'am, we were of the opinion, and ma'am also realized, that the songs are lost and the stories are lost. But while doing a workshop with the children in order and encouraging the usage of the script, the children did come up with stories and did come up with characters, if not complete stories, but at least characters who are rooted in their culture, who are rooted in their in stories that they have seen, that they have experienced, and feelings that they have experienced during their own time in the community. So starting from that, this is the alphabet reader that Professor Rastogi has developed over her time, over her work with the community, and the words and the pronunciations, etc., all have been taken after careful consideration with the community members. And you may notice that the pictures are very generic, and this is something that we are looking to improve and change in the next edition, which we will be bringing out shortly. And in that edition, the pictures will be authentic pictures which will be taking in from the community, and the pictures will belong to the community. For example, here in the first image, you may see that this example of mother, it's not really authentic, because this is not what a Raji mother looks like. So we plan to incorporate an image which is relatable to the community for which the alphabet reader has been created. And similarly with the other, the occupations and the various, the images, etc., in this particular alphabet reader, we want to change it. There are a few other things we also want to incorporate in the reader, but we'll talk about them in a moment. The current alphabet reader also has images from the community like this one, and it has a set of sentences with authentic sentences which the community members themselves have contributed. They are the ones who have created this, but we want to add current as well as old and rarely used terms. For example, there is this term called garfulia, which is no longer used by the generation that we have been working with, that is under 16, but it is used by the older generation and the generation which is working in the stone quarries or in the road construction business, etc. So that particular generation is using it, but the younger ones which are in school, they are not using it anymore. But we would still like to maintain a record as linguists and as documentations, for the strict purpose of documentation of the language. We want to incorporate those terms which have been replaced by the elders as well, because as Professor Rastogi mentioned, she has been working for the past 25 years with the community, and there is record of usage of certain words by members of the community that she worked with all those years ago, and those words have not been heard in the latest field visits that we completed. Now I would also like to mention here quickly that the longevity of the people of this community is not very much, because throughout the work that Professor Rastogi has done and for the past 5 years in which I have been associated with, we have not met a single person who is above the age of 60. And there's all these the issue of longevity could be there could be a number of different things. We have not really done a detailed research into why it happens, but the terrain which they live in is extremely dangerous. The food that they eat, I'm not very sure whether it is I would not like to say anything without any reference, but from what we have observed, from what I have observed as a person who has eaten with them, dined with them, it's not very nutritious in nature. And with different bans that the government has brought in, as far as hunting is concerned, as far as the felling of trees is concerned, maybe the nutrition is also a point of concern, which is why the longevity is decreasing. Also, there is rampant alcohol abuse and a level of drug abuse among the community's elders and community's males as well. Moving on, as far as the alphabet reader is concerned, we would also want to make it into a chart form, because in both the schools that we have visited in the community, there are rooms and there are charts. There is space for the charts to be visible. The alphabet reader has been always in a closed form inside a cupboard, and we have had to bring it out in order to show it to the children in the schools itself, because in previous visits, Professor Rastogi has printed the alphabet reader and distributed it into the schools, hoping that at schools this reader will be used to communicate to the Raji children. But the pressure of assimilation and the pressure of acculturation is so much, and the Raji community's own priority to mix in has created this gap between what we would have wanted the effect of the alphabet reader to be and what it actually was. So we, at least to ensure visibility, we would want the alphabet reader to be in a chart form, which we already have created and which we do plan to, which we already had plans, in fact, before the COVID-19 era, to distribute it, because we had a visit scheduled in March. But anyway, so those the charts will be distributed, and then we have the charts have been created, and these charts have authentic words and authentic pictures and authentic sentences from people of the community. We have taken pictures from the surroundings, and we have also mentioned spelling variations. Now, like I said, these charts will be there for visibility in the classrooms, because in the classrooms, the Raji children are seen, even though they know Raji and they know Raji as a language and they use it in their home domains, but unfortunately in the school domains as well, even to speak with each other, even to speak with somebody from the Raji community, the language has taken a backseat, and it has moved into only the home domain as according to our latest surveys. This folk art manuals like this have also been printed and will be included as supplementary charts and as supplementary pages in the alphabet reader as well. I think there are questions. Okay. Oh, okay. Not for me. Yeah, so this is, you can see this is a choker like necklace which the women of the community wear, and very few women are left who know this art. In fact, in the 7 to 8 hamlets which we went to, and for this particular workshop, there were only 2 women who knew how to do it, and only one of them was could see well enough to help us do this entire thing, because the beads are extremely fine and the thread that goes through the beads is transparent, and they cannot see it unless they have very good vision. And unfortunately, the women after a certain age, they have, the other woman who knew how to do it during her prime cannot see well anymore. We have also, sorry. Okay. This dictionary has also been published, as Professor Rastogi mentioned, that this has been for academic purposes, but for the community's use, we would like to make it into an app. And that is a work in progress. It has 1,256 entries. It is multilingual and multiscriptal pictorial dictionary. And again, pictures from the community, authentic pictures from the community, which indicate their flora, their fauna, and their people, and have been incorporated into the dictionary. And the app, the idea of the app is unfortunately painstakingly slow, because the community's children, even though they are familiar, they have seen smartphones, they are not able to afford smartphones, first of all, and many people, not just the community, in the entire area itself, even if you are not from the Raji community and you fall in one of the so-called mainstream communities, even there the usage of the smartphone is not very popular because network issues are there, and internet is extremely spotty and extremely patchy, and even network is very patchy. So yeah, so the usage of smartphones is not as popular as we would want it to be, or as somebody who is not from the community and who is standing as an outsider would like to think that, oh, everybody has a smartphone and everybody knows how to use a smartphone. So that's not the case, because technology is not something which the community is used to at all, except for the television, which is there in 1 or 2 households only. And the dictionary also has grammatical information and etymology, and currently the print form is only for the academic purposes, but like we said, an app version is in works. We are working on it, and we do plan to release it. It will obviously be on Play Store and free for the community itself, and our plan is to, the ideal plan is to distribute a few smartphones when we have the funding, and get a few students of the schools to use it, use the app and understand how it is used, and probably popularize the usage of the app. And since Hindi and English, both the languages, are very, very much stressed at in school, that this is the language, these are the languages that you need to use, these are the language that you need to use for development purposes, for educational purposes, we believe that the usage of the presence of Hindi and English in the app is going to encourage the usage of Raji as a secondary roadway, because they would want to know what is the Hindi word or the English word for a particular word that they know in Raji, and that way the app will get some kind of traction in the community.
Madri, you have about 5 minutes remaining.
Yes, thank you. I have, I think, just 2 slides left. Now, this is one of the stories that we created with the community students, with the students itself. While we were working with them to encourage the usage of the script and to find out and get them to create create authentic content, because we did not want to create the stories for the students while we were trying to develop content for the community. We did not want to develop the stories. We wanted the students to come up with the stories with characters that they know, with characters that they are familiar with, because we tried the translation process. They were very short stories which were published and which were distributed in a number of Indian schools by a particular publication organization, and they had lots of they had novice level stories and intermediate level stories and advanced level stories, and we thought that we could translate those stories into Raji and get those published as well. And we had also had an entire conversation with the publication house itself, which was also very encouraging. But while we were on field, we realized that these stories are not relevant to the Raji community and the students at all. Because, for example, they had sentences like, "Oh, I love skating. Skating is lots of fun." But for the Raji community students, they had never seen what skating looks like. They do not know what skating looks like. So a translation of that into the Raji language was pointless. So we wanted to come up with stories with the community. So this is one of the stories which the students came up with. It is a character. It's a monster which exists in the community, and it exists near the rivers, and it exists in dreams, and it takes away goats, and it takes away their cattle, etc., and their livestock. So we were extremely excited when this character came up, the character of Raghe. That's the character of the story, and the students had a lot of fun creating the story. And we were able to actually create 6 stories like this, and we are in the process of using the illustrations created by the students to create the stories in storyweaver.com, which is a resource that we recently came across, and we would really like, as soon as possible, we would love to get those stories out and about in the community. And song. This is now, as Professor Rastogi mentioned, the community does not have songs which they sing anymore, which was extremely difficult for me to believe in the first time I was told this, because I thought this is a community which goes to cut grass together. This is a community which goes to fish together, hunts together. So they must have hunting songs. They must have grass cutting songs. They must have songs which they do in all these actions. But unfortunately, try as I might, I was not able. Obviously, because ma'am has been working for the past 20 years, and I will not be able to do something miraculous in the last 5, and I was obviously reminded of the fact that experience is important and I should listen to it. But yeah, so they do not have, I was not able to elicit any of the songs. However, this is something which one of the community members has created. It's a song which she has created, which she has given voice to and composed. However, the tune is very similar to one of the mainstream songs which is available, but I'm guessing that that's something that we have to bargain with, because this is something, and the themes are also not very rooted in their own past, but this is the best that we have right now. And I was extremely excited by Dr. Yaya's talk about how he has a project of funding songs, and and I would really absolutely like to explore that idea. So this is what we have so far. We have this song, we have the 6 stories which the community has created, we have a dictionary, and we have an app in the making, and we have an alphabet reader and charts which we plan to display in the classrooms of the community when we get a chance after this pandemic is over. So thank you very much for listening to us, and I would really like to thank all of you for listening patiently, and we are open for questions now, I think.
Thank you, Madri, and thank you, Kavita. We've got about 2 minutes for any questions or comments. If you have questions, comments, please put them in the chat so that I can call upon you. I don't see anything there at the moment. If I could just ask you one thing quickly, it seems like you're actually a possible way forward for you might be to actually bring the community into the school, into the classroom, engage. You seem to be separating off the children in the school from the adults who are outside, and I wonder if there might be opportunities to create contexts in which the groups are together and to encourage the parents to speak the language. And you know, just mention about, you mentioned the ladies who can't do the embroidery. Well, get them a pair of eyeglasses and see if that would actually help. You know, there are lots of small things, positive things, non-linguistic things, which might be worth thinking about doing. So any other comments or questions? Somebody wants to know about the dominant language spoken. Is it Hindi or Kumaoni?
Ma'am, would you like to take that?
What is his question? I'm not able.
What is the dominant language spoken by Raji speakers aside from Raji? Is it Hindi or Kumaoni?
Peter, it is as in other states, we do not speak standard Hindi. Either we speak Hindi, Urdu. So in Uttarakhand also, many of the Kumaoni speakers, they speak Kumaoni Hindi. So so it's not standard Hindi, but it's Kumaoni Hindi. Many words from Kumaoni, but the main structure is from Hindi.
Thank you. There's one other comment, which is from Julia Salabank, to point out that general support for the community seems to be a way to be linked to the language, given the level of poverty and the situation. So whether it makes sense to do things like provide food support, medical support, general support for communities. One way to keep languages alive is to keep speakers alive. So that might be something for you to consider, raising funds to support the communities. Thank you both very much. A really interesting and rich presentation. Thank you, and we'll move on to the... So the next presenter that we have is Radu Voica from SOAS University of London, Consensual Orthography Establishment as a prerequisite for the creation of lasting pedagogical and literacy materials for endangered languages. And he'll talk about issues and challenges in the case of Blanga, a language of the Solomon Islands.
Okay, can you hear me?
You're fine, Radus, go ahead.
I'm fine. Just give me a second to share my screen.
Yeah, and I'll warn you about 10 minutes towards the end to let you know. Okay?
Yes, and please can you let me know somehow, perhaps in chat, if you can see and hear, because I have the sound recorded separately and I can't speak freely.
Okay, no problem. Go ahead.
Just a second, full screen, share screen, share computer, share. Field by languages with a long, discuss some challenges posed by the establishment of an orthography for an endangered language without a written tradition. For centuries, our understanding of the relations between language and culture was hindered by the misconception that they can only be revealed by languages with a long and prestigious written tradition, and only relatively recently have we become fully aware of the hidden cultural treasures encoded in oral tradition. Most endangered languages do not have a written tradition, and in our efforts of reversing language shift or facilitating language reclamation or language maintenance, we need to be aware of the fact that such goals cannot be successfully achieved solely through a linguistic documentation project. A full documentation must include a range of cultural topics and local knowledge, and if we want the language to survive, it is crucial to find a way to enable the transmission between generations to continue or restart. Undoubtedly, a high priority in this respect is the production of literacy and pedagogical materials, and when there is no written tradition, such materials can only be produced once the linguist has worked out the phonology, made some spelling suggestions, presented those suggestions to the community, explaining the reasons for different choices, considered suggestions made and preferences expressed by members of the community, and decided together with the community on a standardized spelling system for the language. Having achieved that, the community and linguists can gloriously proceed to the production of fascinating literacy materials. But are things really that straightforward? There are numerous challenges here, some of a more general nature, other more community-specific or language-specific, but on top of everything is the matter of consensus. Before the community agrees with the linguist, they need to agree with each other. Otherwise, the planned literacy materials may end up being used only by a particular group or eventually by almost nobody. Consensual community decisions are imperative for the creation of strong and lasting resources for language reclaiming and maintenance. I will illustrate with Blanga, an endangered oceanic language spoken on Santa Isabel Island in the Solomon Islands. Let's first consider the settlements, movements, and contact situations of the Blanga speakers, starting in the center of this unscaled diagram here. When the first Europeans reached the island, late 16th to mid-19th centuries, the Isabel people inhabited a mountainous interior where they felt more protected against enemy raids. The Blanga people settled on several narrow ridges radiating north and south of the high summit plateau in the area at an altitude between 900 and 1,000 meters. From there, some descended towards the northern coast and others towards the southern coast. The ancestors of the northern Blanga people first established a lower settlement at Tirocana at approximately 500 meters above the sea level, and later, at the turn of the 20th century, they moved en masse to Lorrahaza at an altitude of 130 meters, where they received Christianity and built their first church and school. We can also see that the closest neighbors of the northern Blanga people, who also happened to be friendly, were speakers of a dialect referred to as Mai, who may have also had access to the Lorrahaza church and school. Between 1962 and 1964, the entire Lorrahaza population, together with the Maya speakers of Susuru and Kukuduro, descended to Hovukoilo to build a new church and live there as one community. This well-intended but artificial spirit of unity did not last long, and the two groups split in 1966 when the Blanga people established their own settlement and church at Popoheo by the seashores, leaving the Maya people in Hovukoilo. In 1984, in the aftermath of a destructive hurricane, almost half of the Popoheo population left the village and set up a new settlement slightly inland at Kolosori. During the same period, or even slightly earlier, a few Popoheo inhabitants moved back to Hovukoilo, while others established an adjacent settlement called Sogolona. The ancestors of the southern Blanga people have a similar history, yes. They followed similar routes along the southern slopes of the island, had more or less similar contacts with the southern Maya people and with Christian missionaries, and have eventually spread along a similar area on the southern coast. But they have diverged further, and currently we can speak of three Blanga dialects, distinct but only slightly different. Northern Blanga, Southwestern Blanga, and Southeastern Blanga. Zaza was previously considered a separate language and consequently awarded a separate ISO code. Anyway, at the end of the 2010s, there were approximately 1,150 Blanga speakers in all, of which 500 Northern Blanga, 515 Southwestern Blanga, and 135 Southeastern Blanga speakers. The figures here are further broken down by main villages, including minor adjacent settlements. Blanga is subject to a double threat: that of Pidgin, the lingua franca of the Solomons, and that of its vigorous eastern neighbor Cheque-Holo, the major trade language of Isabel, also called Maringa on the northern coast or Hograno on the southern coast. The dialect mentioned before is a Cheque-Holo variety, possibly slightly divergent, but one that have been in contact with Blanga for longer than the Maringa Hograno variety. As a general pattern, Blanga speakers seem to be gradually shifting not to Pidgin and not to Maya, but to Maringa Hograno, in which the majority of them are bilingual. The Blanga speakers use Cheque-Holo for communication with other Isabel communities in most spheres of activity, and also in church. It is seldom used in writing, and when it is, it employs the conventions devised for Cheque-Holo. And here is a summary of these facts for further reference. Each Blanga variety, as well as each village where the language is spoken, faces particular situations that may affect its status. On the northern coast, Hovukoilo is a Maya village, with only a minority of Blanga speakers, most of whom are members of mixed families, while Sogolona is merely an extension of Hovukoilo rather than a settlement in its own right. Kolosori is adjacent to a school that attracts students and teachers from different parts of Isabel and the Solomons, an area of strong contact and multilingualism. I have recently noticed the effects of early intermarriages and of more Cheque-Holo speakers settling in the village. There seems to be a considerable number of children in Kolosori that cannot speak Blanga, and also some young adults who are not fluent speakers and prefer Cheque-Holo. Also, the weekly village council meetings, actually, that I witnessed there, were held in Cheque-Holo, not in Blanga. Popoheo is in a much better situation. The language is transmitted to children, including those from mixed marriages, and all the Blanga adults of Popoheo are fluent speakers. However, it is less than 1 hour walk from Kolosori, and the Popoheo children attend school there. In the early 2010s, a small tsunami hit the northern Isabel shores, and Popoheo was one of the most exposed villages. As a consequence, half of the village moved inland, spreading over an area, a wide area actually, in the western parts of the traditional Blanga territory. Some moved to Garanga, an area inhabited by migrant logging workers and by the staff and students of a vocational school. Others established different settlements in the middle bush and called them Kolobou, Tiromola, and Kovo. Yet others populated an area of past significance for the northern Blanga people called Sisirio. These four settlements are quite isolated, and the language apparently has good chances of surviving. However, as the inhabitants are closely related, intermarriages will occur sooner or later. A few families preferred to settle even more remote and isolated areas, building tiny settlements limited to one or two households deep in the bush. Their children must live on school premises during term time. Southeastern Blanga is only spoken as a minority lect in Biluro, where the majority of people are Maya speakers, and converges with southwestern Blanga at Hirolehu and Tavol. The southwestern Blanga villages trade constantly with their Maye, Ograno, and Kokota neighbors, and the migrant logging workers established around Gazuhungari, while the presence and importance of a provincial school at Kilokaka means daily interaction in Pidgin or Chekeholo. Again. The slides presented so far meant to introduce you not only to the ecology of the language, but also and especially to the issues resulting from the dialectal and geographical distribution of Blanga, its speakers' mobility, and the complexity of contact situations. The existence of three dialects may seem problematic for a unified orthography. However, their phonologies are very similar, and the situation should be considered within a larger context of language change, as I will do later. The three Blanga groups are not in permanent contact with each other. Being separated by mountains and rivers, the easiest way to travel is by sea around the island, but the means of transport are rare and expensive. The recent redistribution of population within the northern Blanga area comes to complicate things even more. The complexity of contact situations and the differences concerning the status of the language in different villages suggest that there are definitely different degrees of interest and involvement of community members. And here the question arises, what is the community? Or who is the community? Ideally, you would have the whole community involved, but that's hardly possible because not everybody gives the time or has enough time and knowledge to participate. So you need to identify possible representatives who are both interested in literacy for different reasons and are influential enough to advise and guide the others. These can be chiefs, entrepreneurs, priests, catechists, teachers, laymen interested in Bible translation, educated youths, you name it. A wave of interest has recently arisen thanks to the spread of mobile telephony and texting. Although only few regions of Isabel are covered and the signal is poor, everybody owns or wishes to own a mobile phone, at least to store music on it, and the possibility of texting is very appealing on an island where there is almost no access to landlines, internet, or email. Talking about consensus, the image of this first type of challenges is not complete if I do not mention that getting more consultants together at the same time, even if they live in the same village, may be more difficult than herding cats. But there are more problems than those presented so far, and on a much more serious note, one must mention the impact of official education policies, or lack of them. English is the official language of education in the Solomons, except for some discussions that I witnessed at a very informal level. There does not seem to be any interest in vernacular education at government level, either central or provincial. The church is mainly interested in promoting literacy in vigorous languages which are understood and used by non-native speakers as well as native speakers. That is why Czechoslovakia has a well-established orthography, a full Bible and prayer book translation, and other printings. NGOs are interested in promoting literature in Pidgin. All these obviously undermine the status of minor languages and diminish their prestige in the eyes of their own speakers, hence less interest from them. The last type of challenges that I'm going to discuss is that posed by the very nature and structure of the language. I mentioned earlier the existence of three dialects. The differences between those are mostly lexical and may pose a challenge for the production of literacy materials rather than for orthography establishment, as many of them concern very frequent words such as those for mother, water, or the number 5. More challenging for us is the presence, at least in northern Blanga, of two different phonological systems, one used by older speakers and one used by younger speakers. In younger people's speech, the voiced alveolar fricative has been replaced by the voiced post-alveolar affricate. The voiceless alveolar fricative, on the other hand, is only in the process of being gradually replaced by the voiceless post-alveolar affricate. The change in this case is neither general nor complete. This means creating a system in which, while the voiced alveolar fricative changed into the affricate in all positions, thus no phonemic contrast existing between the two, the emergence of the voiceless affricate did not lead to the disappearance of the fricative, the correspondent fricative, the tendency being to keep the former at least in order to avoid homonymy and thus generating minimal pairs. Therefore, as far as the voice segment is concerned, the word for go, for instance, is pronounced zaho by the older generation and jaho by the younger one. Which letter then shall we use? Z, which better reflects the fricative, or J, which better reflects the affricate and is used for that in Czechoslovakia too. The former will soon have only historical value. The latter only anticipates unanimous adoption of an innovation that hasn't been unanimously adopted yet. I have seen old people using J in words where otherwise they pronounce a Z. If the J is preferred, won't that artificially accelerate the change by suggesting that J is the correct pronunciation? In the case of the voiceless counterpart, several minimum pairs occur in the younger people's speech, such as Sara versus Chara on the slide here. Shall we use both S and the digraph CH to reflect the speech, or shall we impose S everywhere? S needs to stay anyway, but imposing CH may accelerate a change that is only in an incipient stage, and nobody knows if it will be fully adopted in the end. Another thing, glottal stops are not phonemic, but frequent glottal epenthesis occurs in both older and younger people's speech. It is also possible that the glottal stop is currently acquiring marginal phonemic status with the younger speakers. This is based on 5 minimal pairs in which it is contrasted with 0, all of which are also attested in Czechoslovakia and are obviously loan words in Blanga. For all the people, these pairs are simply homonymous with glottal epenthesis in free variation. I would like to discourage the notation of the glottal stop in writing because although at this stage we may be witnessing a slight tendency of its becoming a marginal phoneme, it cannot be predicted that this will happen in the end. Innovations can be discarded before they are unanimously accepted. There are two latent-based systems that the Blanga people are called to choose from. A system based on the Czechoslovak orthography, known by all who have ever needed to write something in the language, and a revised system favored by the linguist and by a handful of elders who attended an SIL seminar in the 1980s, I think, together with some younger speakers of the southern dialects. While the former system uses both digraphs and diacritics, the latter eliminates diacritics completely, which makes it more appropriate for typing. The controversial phoneme-letter correspondences concern the voiced velar plosive, the voiced velar fricative, and the velar nasal, as well as sequences consisting of the voiceless glottal fricative followed by a sonorant. Surprisingly, the Czechoslovak-based system uses the letter G for the voiced velar fricative, while the voiced velar plosive is symbolized by a G with a macron. In the revised system, G is used for the voiced velar plosive, while the voiced velar fricative is rendered by the digraph GH, which is the most used transliteration for languages that have this phoneme. The velar nasal is symbolized by an N with a macron in the Czechoslovak-based system and by the digraph Anji in the revised system. Some Isabel languages have sequences consisting of a period of voicelessness followed by a sonorant. This can be interpreted as one single segment, pre-aspirated or devoiced, or as two segments, a voiceless glottal fricative and a sonorant, a consonant cluster, that is. In Blanga, they are definitely consonant clusters, but no matter the interpretation, the problem is that the Czechoslovak-based system writes the two components in reverse order. Now, the revised system maintains that they should be written in the order they occur. Now, people are more familiar with the Czechoslovak-based system, but my recommendations to the Blanga speakers are to adopt the revised system and standardize it. Letters with macrons are not encoded in Unicode, although they can be obtained from combinations of symbols, while sequences of H plus the sonorant letter are closer to the Blanga linguistic reality. A writing system, however, is not limited to reflecting the phonological reality, but should normally reflect some aspects of morphosyntax and prosody too. It must also include pragmatic and stylistic devices. But due to time limitations, I have not included issues associated with clitics, punctuation, capitalization, and others. I hope to be able to include these in a written paper if selected for proceedings. Now, I only have time to announce that in order to persuade the Blanga speakers to reach consensus on the orthography matter and to discuss literacy issues, I'm organizing a 2-day Blanga spelling a literacy workshop. The workshop is funded by this very foundation for endangered languages and will take place as soon as the COVID-19 situation is under control. I hope to be able to do the following: decide together with the community on a standardized spelling to be used in further printed materials and communications, to organize an oral literature collection with the involvement of the members of the community, decide on and prioritizing future printed materials in Blanga, discuss the possibility of revising the translation of the Blanga prayer book and hymnal, establish a basis for the creation of the first Blanga primer. And that's almost it. You have some references here and acknowledgements, and I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Radus. That's absolutely perfect timing.
Yeah.
We've got 10 minutes for questions and comments.
Yeah, I wasn't able to read everything in the chat.
No, it's okay. I'll identify one. One person, Simona, talks about paying the possibility of an orthographic system that doesn't directly represent pronunciation or phonetics, and think about, say, the English spelling system where W-A-T-E-R could be pronounced water or water.
Yeah, but that's still based on some phonological processes that happen. I mean, there's a glottal stop that it's an allophone of the T there. But I understand the suggestion, but I think I don't know, it's very interesting. I've never thought of that, but I think people are familiar with what they have now, and it's not about choosing a complete, writing system from scratch, but just about deciding on these two elements. And I have the impression that many of the people have this traditional view of maintaining the Chequeholo-based system. The revised system is just a way of probably of linguists of saying, things look a bit better like this. But yeah, that's an idea. I'm not sure exactly how that kind of polynomic writing system can be devised, but yeah.
Okay. Another comment from David Nathan.
Hi, David. Yes.
David, if you're there, do you want to follow up?
Yeah. Am I hearable?
Yes, go ahead.
Or just from my experience or practical experience now on Groote Eylandt, it's very clear that firstly, in the case of the Wanamamalio or Anandiliakwa people on Groote Eylandt, there not only do the linguists disagree about aspects of the orthography, but different townships or the east-west divide across the island take views about their language or variants as being really important for their identities. And so the idea of actually neutralizing or standardizing those is maybe counter to actually some sense of community self-determination. I've been quite interested to see all along while we nerdy linguists talk about phonology. If you look at, for example, what people are doing with texting, which is something you mentioned earlier, Radu, then actually there's a quite amazing things creative going on where people are actually using a different language altogether, using Creole, and pimping their Creole, or sometimes occasionally their Anandiyakwa, using all kinds of diacritics and substituting Q's for G's and so on. That kind of interesting literacy phenomenon seems to get missed by linguists because we're overly concerned with standardization and phonology.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and you're absolutely right. We should probably consider more to go beyond those. But in the end, at the end of the day, here the choice will belong to the community here. And I do not want to influence them in any way. I just hope that they would be able to come together and discuss this a little bit. And that's probably the most difficult. That's the biggest challenge of all, I think, to get them together in a way or another, and to find something that stimulates them or encourage them somehow to get together and discuss this, because my impression is that there is only a minority of people that are actually interested in orthography and literacy, and most of them, or most of the others, don't even give a damn.
Okay, thank you very much, Rodis. That was a really interesting talk and good discussion that we had afterwards. So that brings us to the end of this session. thank you to all of the speakers and for their presentations. I'm not sure if Rita or Lily have any announcements, but